Good afternoon, and welcome to A Beer with the Old Growler. I'm the Old Growler, Pete LaFrance, and I'm glad to be here with you. Today is a Wednesday. It's the 10th day of June, 2020. And this, as I say, is a thirsty time. It's summertime out there. This is the 58th Old Growler. So we've got two more to go before 60. That would be 2.5 months of the Old Growler. Yes, sirree. And it's day 85 of pause, what they call pause here in New York, which means stay inside or whatever they want to call it. But that's the situation we're in, and that's why I'm here, because I am an author and a journalist. I've been covering the malt beverage and hospitality industry for 35, 40 years. I'm author of Beer Basics and Cooking and Eating with Beer. And all the research that went into those, well, I've continued because I've continued to be a journalist to covering the industry, especially online, and with a blog that is coming up called The Old Growler. Beforehand, it was Beer Basics, but we're working on that. So what we do here is we have ourselves a beer at 5 o'clock because all of the pubs, bars, restaurants, and taverns in New York City have been closed down for a while. You can only get takeaway cups. That's something new and different, isn't it? It certainly is here in New York. Well, anyway, it's 5 o'clock and it's time for a beer. I usually had myself a relaxing beer beforehand, and I'm going to have one now. So, what we've got here is a growler. Yep, that's a growler. Not an old growler. It's a new growler. Well, it's not a new growler. It's actually an old growler, too, because I've got this up in Kittery, Maine at the Tributary Brewing Company. And that's Todd Mott's organization, where they do some good beers. But today it was a matter of going over to the Henry Street Ale House, where we used to have our tastings on Thursdays. And they are selling beer by the growler. And so it's time for me to have myself a beer. And I hope you'll join me having a beer. And if not, a glass of wine maybe, or a cocktail, even better. We're all friends in fermentation, that's for sure. All right, today I have, let me just check my receipt. I do believe this is a Coney Island Mermaid Pilsner. Okay, well, let's crack this open and see what happens. The computers had a little bit of beer a couple of weeks ago, and so it's been kind of difficult. So I'm not going to pour near the computer. Oh, that's a lot of head on that beer. Whoa, look at that. Yep. Oh, that looks refreshing on a hot day like today. Except it's too much beer. Not really too much beer. I'll let that head settle down for a little bit. Way over there, 3 feet away from the computer. Instead of a 6-foot distance, we've got a 3-foot distance. Oh, good to see a few people have showed up today. That way I'm not drinking alone. And I've got a thumbs up there. I want to thank you for the thumbs up. And those of you who are new, I want to welcome you. Cheers. And those who have been here before, you know the game. So for those of you who have not been here, the newcomers, this is the way it works. I get to have myself a beer to quench my thirst. And then it's a matter of tasting a beer. And we have a beer tasting. And today it is Wasatch Guava Rosa Ale. Now, we tried this before, and I will put a link to that down in the information box below. And also, we'll have a little bit of a banner up there, I'm sure, once we get the tasting, so that we can compare tasting notes from the past and tasting notes today. Always, I like to try a beer 2 or 3 times to see what it tastes like, because, well, there's a difference between drinking beer and tasting beer, and I'm going to get to that later on when we get to the second half of this production, and that is my life as a professional barfly. And as you can see from the books that I have written, I have the qualifications, that's for sure. But today I'm also going to talk about a British writer named Lawrence Osborne, and he wrote a book, The Wet and the Dry: A Drinker's Journey. And what he went and did, did was to he started out in Italy and then decided to make a tour of the Middle East in places where beverage alcohol is illegal and punishable by some nasty things. So he figured he'd go out and look for trouble. And I'll get to that later on after the beer tasting. And the beer tastings, they're always fun. This is how it works. What we do is, well, we'll take a look at what's going to be here tomorrow. And tomorrow, we're going to taste a Brooklyn Bel Air Sour. Bel Air Sour. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at the information on here. And I tell you, that is a tough label to read. I'm going to have to get my reading glasses out for this one. This is a tough one. But in any event, what we do is we take a look at the label. Now, in the past, when we were able to do this, take a look at the playlist called Tastings at the Henry Street Ale House. You can see the process that we do. It's usually Jerry Scott, the bartender and manager, Jim Bennis, a buddy of mine, and at least one or two other people that are come in and just right there to visit. So what we do is we take a look at the label, as I said, and we read everything that's on there, all the information we can possibly get from it, and we know the type of brewery it is, we know the type of beer it is, and so we kind of guess, what do we expect? And then we crack it open. Jerry cracks it open, we pass it around, and we see if it meets expectations, and if it does, it gets a thumbs up, and if it doesn't, it gets a thumbs down. So we'll look forward to Brooklyn Bel Air Sour tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting one. I'll tell you. Now, today, today it's been hot. It's around 80 degrees out there, maybe 83, especially if you're standing in the sun. It's been relatively quiet. Here at where I am right now, at this very moment, I'm about maybe 125 yards from the pedestrian entrance and traffic entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge, which is an iconic bridge here in New York. I'm sure you all know about it. And so whenever there is a demonstration, well, it goes across the bridge. And so far today, there hasn't been one. It's been busy for the last week so far. And it certainly has been an interesting experience, that's for sure. And the park over near the ale house had quite a few more people out there today than in the past. Usually it's been pretty quiet. And the bridge, I walk across. I'm very familiar with the Brooklyn Bridge. I walk across it every morning with my wife, and we see. I would say maybe in the past it was maybe a dozen people all the way for walk back and forth, and that's 2.5 miles. So let's see, it's a mile and a half. It's 2.1 across. So that's 4.2 miles for the entire walk, and most of them were on bicycles. And some of them are pedestrians. Most of them are bicycles or joggers, staying in shape. And so that's the morning thrill. Brandon, good afternoon. Good to see you. Cheers. Oh boy, that's a good beer. It is made in upstate New York. It is not made in Coney Island. But it is quite I believe the name of the beer company altogether is Schmaltz Brewing Company, or I'm not too sure. I'll have to check that out and leave it in the information box below. But they've done some very interesting beers, and I did have a chance to visit their. They did have a brewery at one time on Coney Island. It was a very small brewery. It only brewed like about 5 gallons in a batch, so it was pretty much just a demonstration. But it was quite an event. And if I can find the link, I will definitely put it down in the information box below. And that way you can see what it was really like on Coney Island. Oh, boy, that was wild out there. Greetings, Monica. Good to see you. Cheers. Oh, and thanks for the thumbs up, guys. I really appreciate it. And if you would, those of you who are not subscribers, subscribe, please. I would appreciate that even more. And if you hit the alert bell down there, that way you will know when every single one of the old growlers goes on air. Oh, Mayor, good to see you all the way up there in New Hampshire. I certainly hope things are a little bit cooler up there than they are here. I'm sure they're just as humid, though. And that, having gone to school in Vermont up there, I know what it's like in the summer times or at this time of year. We used to get out June. Yeah, this is in June. We would leave campus. We'd have to clean out our barracks and then split by the middle of the week or the month. I'm sorry about that. And it was funny. Every once in a while, there would be snow on the ground. So things have changed. That's for sure. Okay, just a little bit more beer. Aha, Brandon is drinking on the Bat Squatch Hazy IPA, another one of those hazy daisy crazy beers that they've got. I certainly hope it's tasty. It's an IPA, so I wonder what kind of hops it has in it. But that would be, I'm going to definitely look that one up. And let's see, I saw Dave there. Is Dave in there? Yes, sir, Dave's here. Good to see you, Dave. Thanks very much. And a sound check. Let's have a sound check there, Dave. If you could possibly do that for me, I'd appreciate it. There we go. Sound check number 1. Cheers. Oh, that is good. That is good. As I mentioned, things have been a little bit quieter today than normal, or than what we have gone to semi-normal. But now it is time to do the tasting. Now, as I said, in the past, when we used to do meeting expectations, it was at the Henry Street Ale House. And what we would do was we would get together and do exactly this. Here we go. Great. Thanks, Dave. Much better. All right. Here we go. Wasatch Brewery, Guava Rosa Ale with guava. That's what it says right on there. Ale with guava. Now, we work our way around the label. 7.1% alcohol by volume and 8 IBUs. Now, an international bittering unit, for those of you who are not familiar with that phrase, the higher the IBU, the international bittering unit, the more bitter the beer is, or the more bite that it has to it. And the lower, Budweiser, I think, is 35 IBUs. Let's see, an India Pale Ale could go as high as 80 IBUs. This one is 8 IBUs, which means there's very little hops in this little level. Let's see what it says. As you can see, it's a little difficult to read the label, so I'm going to have to adjust here. Tropical tart refreshing. Join us for a day in the sun and sand with this Mexican-inspired ale, brewed with real agave to lend sweet and tart notes that shine against a subtle hop profile. This light pink cerveza is a fiesta in a can. Wasatch Brewery, Salt Lake City, Utah, established in 1986. We drink our share and sell the rest. I like that. WasatchBeers.com. Please recycle. The Surgeon General's warning that if I'm pregnant, I shouldn't drink. And it says, 12 fluid ounces of unfiltered beer. All right. So we know that it's hazy. We also know that it is, say, something light pink. So we have a light pink haze coming on. And let's see when it was brewed or bottled. It says, well, it doesn't say when it was canned. Canned. Oh, no, the September. It says enjoy by September 26th, 2020. So that would be 2 days after my birthday. So I'm not going to save this one. No, we're not. We're not going to save it. All right. What do we expect? We expect a hazy pink beer that doesn't have much hops to it. And I wonder what kind of malt that they use, but they don't say. I'm imagining they might have put a little wheat in here, possibly, but we're going to find out. So, what do we expect? A pink, fizzy, cloudy beer. Well, and not too bitter, not too bitter. Okay, let's give it a shot. Always put it in a wine glass, a white wine glass, because that way all of the beers come on an equal footing. There's no special tulip bulb so that you can get extra aromatics. No, 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 no. What we want to do is have everybody on an evil footing. Yeah, an equal footing. All right, let's crack this open. All right, here we go. 3 feet back, 2 feet back. Surprise, 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 Sergeant Carter. I don't see any pink here. Or if that's pink, well, I need my eyes examined. All right, that's the first. It's not pink. Okay. It is cloudy. Oh, yes, sir. It's cloudier than a day in, well, a winter afternoon in Vermont. And let's see now. It's got a pretty good head, so it's got a good deal of a hop in a cheap of grain. It's got a good grain grist. So let's give it a sip, a swig. You're right, Brendan. A bit sour. Yes. Yep, definitely. It doesn't say it's sour on the. It just says ale. So I wasn't expecting the sour. I was expecting the pink. I was not expecting much hop, so I wasn't expecting to have a bite to it. Well, I will say this for it. It is it's particular. It's I wish that I had a real knowledge of what guava tastes like. That would help because if I knew what guava tasted like, I would know that that's what the taste is. But I'm getting flavors here that I am not familiar with, and so it's a little bit disconcerting, confusing, and I think that's the best word to use for this beer is confusing. Does it meet expectations? In fact, let's take a look here and go back to does Wasatch Brewery Guava Rosa Ale meet expectations? Uh, no, because I was expecting a pink beer to start with. Not really, because I was expecting a little bit less bitter. I was expecting some kind of a fruity type of flavor, maybe a Caribbean type. Now, how would one describe a Caribbean flavor? I have no idea. That's fruit of, I guess, some sort of tropical fruit. Although a guava is a tropical fruit, so Peter, the fact that you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to tropical fruits, well, there you go. That's one of the things you're going to have to work on. So, but does it meet expectations? No, I'm afraid it doesn't, and that's the way it goes. Every once in a while, you get one that does, and this one just doesn't. So, unfortunately, the Wasatch Guava Rosa Ale does not meet expectations. But I'm the old growler, and I hope that all of your beers meet expectations. Well, that wasn't an Oh, 3 feet away. 1, 2. That's 3 feet. All right. Let's get back to a clear beer. Oh, that has a really different flavor now. That's similar. I was when you tasting two different styles of beer. Your taste buds, your taste sensors, um, they don't like to be shocked. They like tranquility, oh, harmony, oh, and balance. Oh. Unless you're looking for something hot or spicy, and then your taste buds are geared up for it. They're ready. Oh, oh, oh. But not for changes over in beer. Cherison Rogue Batter Snatch has surprised me. Really tasty. Ah, excellent. Yeah, do me a favor and in the comments below, uh, list like a couple of those beers that I might try and find them, or certainly contact the brewery and see if they'll send me a bottle or a can. I'd appreciate that. The more beers we get to taste, the better off we are. That's for sure. I love tasting beers. Well, I also love drinking beers. And that brings me to the topic of the professional barfly, which I'm going to keep kind of short today. I do have a relative script here, and it does have, oh yes, it does have a cheat sheet on the Guava Rosa, and I will share that with you and see how close I came to the observations. Guava Rosa was inspired by a trip south of the border to Guadalajara, Mexico, for a collaboration beer with the award-winning brewery Cerveza Loba to create a special anniversary beer. Wasatch Brewmaster Jon Lee's favorite beer on the trip was Loba Paraíso, Paraiso, Paraíso, one of Loba's most popular beers. The Paraíso utilizes hundreds of pounds of fresh guava from the same markets he had visited. As John enjoyed one of many Paraísos, he realized, quote, the bright tropical fruit flavors are so refreshing in the desert climate of Mexico and would translate perfectly to the high desert for which Utah is known, end quote. Guava Rosa drinks like a cocktail with the heart of a beer, and that's what I'll be reaching for all summer long, said Lee. Okay. And it's available from April to July, so it is a summer beer that they put out. So that's their take on it, and I'm sticking to mine. All right. Now we get to the part that for those of you who are still here, thank you very much. But my life as a professional barfly, now it's my reminiscence, and I'm going to keep it short today because it is so hot outside, and I do have air conditioning in here, but I didn't want to turn it on because it's noisy, I tell you. Okay, what I want to talk about today is the difference between tasting and drinking a beer, and I would also like to touch on the social aspect and the cultural aspect, not only of beer but of drinking as well. And I'd like to bring that up. I read a book called The Wet and the Dry. It's a drinker's journal by Lawrence Osborne, a British writer. He's the author of The Forgiven. And he is, to say that this is a dark book would be an understatement. His look on his take on drinking is very contemplative. And however, he does note, he starts out in Italy, and he decides this book is The Wet and the Dry. The wet are the Western countries, Europe, United States, Canada, and this culture, and he notes it as particularly, he starts out in Italy, about the culture of drinking in Italy, and the culture of wine and entertaining and enjoyment of it. And he noted he starts out in one of the plazas and notes all of the people drinking very joyously as part of life. And there's no one falling down. There's no over intoxication. It's part of the culture. Wine is drunk with meals. My wife had an uncle who was with the DEA for a long time, and late uncle, and we were able to visit him in Paris back in 1984 or 83, and especially amongst at a cafe or at a diner or bistro, it would be if you didn't drink a bottle of wine with dinner, and dinner lasted 3 hours. There was something wrong. They would ask, his buddies would ask, is there something wrong? Are you okay? And it's so much part of a culture. Here in New York, pubs, bars, and taverns of New York have been part of New York's cultural life for since New York was New York. Actually, since it was New Amsterdam, because even when it was New Amsterdam, Jesuit priests came here, and let's face it, it was New Amsterdam was maybe 300 or 400 buildings at most, and what he observed. Well, New York was a major port. Let's remember, even back then, even back in the late 1600s, early 1700s, it was a major port, and he was blown away. First of all, that practically every building in New York, in New Amsterdam, had either a bar or a brewery. That was the first thing that he was just absolutely blown away by. And the other was, and now remember that this was in the 18th century. He said that there were more than 200 languages spoken. Now, that is amazing for that time. Of course, all the ships were coming in. They came in from South America. They came in from the Pacific. I mean, of course, and everybody you had to speak. And it was part of the culture of brewing and drinking and distilling. And that was very much a part of the culture of New York City, the pubs, bars, and taverns. Well, the interesting thing is Mr. Osborne decides to go visit countries that are less than acceptable to beverage alcohol. And he finds some interesting things, particularly in Syria and Lebanon. Enforcement depends on how wealthy you are and how positioned you are. And one of the interesting things he points out is that in Egypt, in particular, and I love this bit about Egypt. Even when the Muslim Brotherhood were in control of the government, they still brewed beer, and it was a national beer called palm beer. And not palm like in the beer that is from the Netherlands, not the Netherlands, Belgium. No, this is it had a palm tree on the label, and it was brewed the state. And the reason that it was brewed, the reason it was given, was that Egypt, going way back to the pharaohs, considered beer liquid bread and not alcohol. And so liquid bread was just fine, but it wasn't alcohol. So just don't say it. And it's 3.5% alcohol. So it's funny how beer goes into cultures and stays in cultures. And that brings me to the difference between tasting and drinking. Oh, that's good. Drinking a beer is a social thing as well. Tasting a beer is something that one does on their own. Even when you're with a group of people and you're doing an organized tasting where you have unmarked, you have glasses out there and they're unmarked beer bottles or cans that have no labels on it, and they pour them and you taste them and you deconstruct them. Oh, what type of malt do you taste? What type of hops do you taste? Yeast will change the flavor and the aromas of a beer. And so that is, you're concentrating and you're deconstructing and you're studying this particular beer. Now, drinking a beer is a little bit different. Drinking a beer is enjoying it, is not dissecting it, not deconstructing it, but enjoying it. And that is part of our culture, is enjoying beverage alcohol. And it's a sharing thing. And that's one of the most, I think, frustrating things today, is not being able to share a beer. So I'm happy that I can share it with you guys. And hopefully by the end of the week, as I say, this is going to be the 60th. I threatened to do a celebration on the 50th, but the 60th, we're going to have to do a little bit of celebrating. I'll have to share it with you just online, but hopefully be able to share with you. I've got a couple of beers to try. Jamie Gerardo sent me a couple of a series of 3 beers that were put out. I believe we have 1998, 1990, 1980s, 1998, 1997, something like that. But it's a series of beers, and so we're going to enjoy those. We're not going to deconstruct them. We're going to share them, and I will let you all know when we will do that for sure. So stay tuned. On your radio dial. Stay tuned to 2:05 Eastern Time. And now that's the way it is. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for showing up today. You've been a great group. Cheers to you all. And as I've noted before, and I will say it again, subscribe, share, thumbs up, and for goodness sake, leave a comment. I would love to hear from everybody watching this, because that is how things get done. I find beers, I find out places to go, places to taste eventually, but beers right now. I'd love to have a list of beers to taste with you guys and to drink as well. Okay, well, we've got quite a few people here. Maybe I can let me take a vote. If you all disappear, I'm going to hang out for a little bit. Now, let's see. Well, we can talk about beer. Yes. One of the interesting things I do at beer tastings, and that's tastings as well as drinking, but even drinking, to do a mindset and look at the beer and then taste it. Now, don't think of it as beer. Think of it as fermented drink. The first thing you notice is that you don't really taste anything until after you've opened your mouth. And once you've swallowed something, but once you let air, it resonates in your mouth and in your nasal passages. And that's one of the fun things about beer, is the difference between beer and wine tasting. Wine tasting, you take a little bit, you pull the air through aspirating, it's called, and then you spit it out, and then you aspirate again. Okay, you don't swallow. Why? I don't. The only reason I think that why you don't swallow wine is because it doesn't have the extra hops accent, which does resonate in the nasal passages, and so you don't do that. It's a different tasting technique. And Harriet Lembeck, who used to write for the New York Times, met her at one of the tastings when I was working at Beverage Media, and she insisted on it was one of the Japanese breweries, and she insisted on a spit bucket. Silverthorne, spit out beer, you savage. Good to see you, Silverthorne. Pleasure. Glad to have you with us. Yeah, well, that was it. And so it was kind of funny we tried to explain to her. I think, let's see now, as far as journalists here in New York, I think Alan Wax and a couple of the other kids, we tried to talk to her about it, but she wouldn't listen. Funny thing was though, a few months later, she did an exhibition at the New School here in New York, and it had to do with homebrewing. Someone had brought her in to consult with a homebrewing presentation, and she asked me to show up and explain the difference between spitting and not spitting for beer. And that was fun. It really was. But you learn even in just enjoying beer. How does it feel in your mouth? What do your taste buds? Your taste buds, after a while, they get a little tired, just like us. And after 3 beers is my tops for tastings. If you go any more than 3 beers, you get confused, and it's tough. So then you start to just enjoy the beer, and that's the fun part. It's always great to enjoy a beer, I think. Um, and of course, the flavors, uh, the stories you tell. Session beers. Session beers are maybe 4% alcohol by volume, and they're called session beers because you can drink 3, 4, 5 of them and not become intoxicated. And you can, especially in pubs, bars, and taverns, get together with your friends, have some conversation over a beer or two or three or four. And boy, I tell you, I've heard rumors. The New York City Restaurant Association says that we're going to be able to open up again. July 7th, I believe, was the as far as opening up, being able to have outdoor tables and being able to have, I think, half of capacity and distancing. But thank you, Silverthorne. Thanks very much. I'd really appreciate your comments in the box in the comment box below about this, and I look forward to seeing you again, and I look forward to seeing all of you again. That's for certainly sure. As I say, I've gone a little bit over time today. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I want to thank everybody for hanging out and having a beer with the Old Growler, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I certainly hope so. Well, thanks again. Enjoy your day, your afternoon, your evening, or your morning, wherever you may be. Keep in touch, and I'll see you next time.